Hi there, my name's Bruce Rain from Brankus Creations, and in this video I'll be testing out the Sequre HT140 solder tweezers. So what are solder tweezers and why do you need them? And can you pluck your eyebrows with them? No is the answer to that one. Soldering surface mount components to a PCB is a pretty straightforward process. If you'd like to learn a little more about this, check out my Beginner's Guide to Surface Mount Soldering here. But what if you make a mistake, or what if a component fails and needs to be replaced? Now we move from the world of soldering to the world of rework, and solder tweezers are one of the tools used for soldering rework. If you want to remove a component like this, it's soldered on both sides. You could try and use a soldering iron, but it can only deliver heat on one side of the component at a time. You could use two soldering irons to melt both sides at once, you could use a hot air station, or you could use soldering tweezers. Let's take a look at the Sequre solder tweezers. It's got a lovely little case, very solid, and let's take a look inside. We've got a power supply here, 65 watt. Let's get this plastic off. Nice. Now we've got a US plug here, but I see we've got a little adapter, so I can just slot that in so I can use this on an Australian plug. So that is fantastic, nice and easy. Then we have got a little stand. That's really nice. Actually got some good weight to that, so that should stay up, which is great. And then we have the tweezers themselves, and there they are. Again, they're quite small, but they've got a decent amount of weight to them. They sort of feel like they're made pretty well. And of course we've got our little protector here. Let's take that off. Yippee. Okay, well, they feel nice action to them. That's as close as they get together. We've got two inputs there. We've got the barrel jack there, and then we've got a USB-C port there. So that's great. And we've got some bits. Now there's no printed manual, but we do have a little QR code here for downloading the manual, which I have done. It downloads a PDF file, and that PDF file is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. It is formatted as one single incredibly long page. I have separated those pages and printed the manual out should it be needed during my testing. So there it is. And we have got a lovely USB-C cable here. This feels beautiful. It's got that silicon feel about it, you know, nice and wibbly wobbly. So that's good, and that looks like a pretty decent sort of length. I'm going to say that's probably about maybe 1.5 meters, something like that. It's certainly enough for me in terms of where my power points are located. I can plug this in and won't have any issues there. And then we've got, this is part of the stand. We've got our little sponge. Sponge goes in there. I tend not to use a sponge. I prefer to use these things, but it's nice they included that sponge there. And then it looks like this can kind of mount in different places if you want. I think the most logical place to mount it would be there, so that your tweezers can go in like that. Ouch, they are sharp. Okay, so there is our little stand assembled, and we can put the tweezers into there. So that's nice. That's a nice, really nice fit, that actually. Quite like that. Yeah. Very nifty. Time to have a closer look at the tweezers themselves. Now, the heating elements are actually held in by, looks like 3 little grub screws, or is it 4? 4 little grub screws. So I'm actually, they provided a little Allen key for those, so I'm actually going to undo these, and we'll whip one of these out, see how difficult that is to do. And there we go. So that's the heating element there. It's a nice cute little device there, and it's my understanding that you can actually put a range of different tips into this should you want to, but these seem to be a pretty practical tip for what this is designed for. We've got a curved conical tip there. The curve is really good because it means you can sort of put it down flat and you get better heat transfer from that larger surface area from the curve. But it also has a very fine point, so you can be working with very, very small components. That just slots back in there, and then tightens into place with the grub screws. They have provided a set of spare grub screws as well. So if you happen to accidentally lose some of these, you do have a few extras. Right, let's have a little look inside, shall we? Oh, I think there might be another screw under there. And I was right. Okay, that's what it looks like inside. The little barrel connector here looks to be pretty solid. That's quite good. And we've got little metal sockets for the screws to go in too, which is quite nice. It's a nice little touch and makes it sort of feel a lot less kind of tinny. This little bit of glue here, someone's actually glued this into the case, so I don't know, do I whip them out? There's a little springy bit there for opening the tweezers back out again. Okay, and there is the inside of it. A little USB-C connector there, two little buttons there, and there's our little display. It looks like the main CPU is sitting underneath the display, but I'm not going to rip that off because, well, I haven't used this yet. I don't want to break it yet. It'd just be stupid. Now, without even switching this on, I can tell you there's one thing about this that I don't particularly like, and it reminds me of these other little soldering irons like the TS100 and TS101, that they have these two buttons and a screen. And the way you navigate is by doing short press and long press of these buttons, rather than having like a left, right, and select. I think these would work so much better if they use three buttons instead of two, because to be honest, some of the navigation is really counterintuitive. But having said that, a lot of these devices are made in the same way, so I think my complaints are just going to go unheard, because that's just how they're made. All right, time to give it some power. Oh, and I made a little song. 30 degrees C, that is the temperature it is right here at the moment. It's bloody hot. And what do we do to switch it on? I'm going to just press that. No, that did nothing. I'll press that. No, that did nothing. As I said before, these are often using this long press, short press. So how about I long press one of these buttons? Oh, that's heating up now. Okay, that's heating up to 300 degrees C. Let's just see if it's at a temperature to melt solder at this stage. Oh, yep. Is doing it. Okay, so that's fine. And switching it off. Okay, no, am I changing anything? Okay, pressing that one is now taking it up to 100 degrees C. 150. Okay, so that's interesting. So I'm setting the temperature here and it goes up in 50 degree increments, which seems a lot. What do we go up to? Maximum 450. Get some smoke off it there now. 500. I'm not sure if it really is 500, but yep, that's as high as it'll go. Oh, I press and hold down and I start to get some menu options here. Calibration. Work temp 300 degrees C. Okay, temp step 50. Okay, so I said it had 50 degree increments, but that is something that is configurable. So let's change that to 20. I think that's a far more practical step to be going. There we go. Okay, what do I press to get out of this now? Press them both, hold down. Oh, yeah, that worked. I'm going to send this up a little bit. I like to work at a much higher temp than 300. So I'm going to set this as my working temp of 400 and we'll see how it goes. Okay, well, it looks like I managed to actually change a setting on this and I did it without the instructions, so I'm feeling pretty happy with myself.
Before I start testing, I'm going to go over some of the documented features. It supports a wide voltage range from 5 volts to 28 volts and can be powered via USB-C or the barrel jack. The interface has support for Chinese, English and Russian languages. It can heat just one or both of the tips, allowing it to be used either as a regular soldering iron or solder tweezers. It has compatibility with JBC 210 tips, so there's a wide range of different tips available. It has a 128 by 32 pixel OLED screen with brightness adjustment. It can be configured with the screen rotated 180 degrees so it will suit both left and right-handed users. The two button functions can be swapped as well. It's light, weighing only 50 grams, it has upgradable firmware via the USB connection, and it has automatic standby and sleep when not in use. One thing I really like is it will operate with a standard 5V 3A USB power supply. So I can actually use it with a basic power bank like this. Obviously you need to set your expectations accordingly regarding the heating speed, but it is functional. As I mentioned before, I'm not a big fan of the controls. Long press button A to start or stop heating the tip. Short press buttons A or B to lower or raise the heating temperature respectively. Long press button B to enter the main menu. Short press buttons A or B to navigate backwards or forwards. Then long press button B to make your selection. Long press both buttons at once to go back.
And this is something I find a bit annoying. If you're in the menu and you don't touch any buttons for 5 seconds, it'll leave the menu and go back to the main screen. I just don't think 5 seconds is long enough. Imagine you're in the menu, you grab the manual to check and see what a particular function does, but by the time you get back to the tweezers, it's already left the menu. I guess they've done this because long pressing the two buttons at once isn't very intuitive, so they've compensated for this by making it return to the main screen automatically.
Here is a quick tour of the settings. Long press B for the main menu, then long press B again to select HT, which I guess stands for heat temperature or something? Heated tweezers? High tension? The first option here is work temp. This is for setting the standard operating temperature. Temp step is for setting the incremental change to the temperature. As we saw before, this is on 50 by default, but I have reduced that to 20. We have temperature compensation for the left and right tip, so if the two tips aren't reaching the same temperature, you can calibrate them separately. There is also a calibration setting which we'll look at in a minute, but that applies to both tips. We can toggle the temperature units between Celsius and Fahrenheit, and there's this temp shield option which can be toggled off or on, and is described as stable temperature display. I'm not sure what that is, but it's on by default. You can switch the beeping noise off and on with the buzzer option. The mechanical buttons are quite loud and clicky, so you may not need the beeps, but I'm happy to keep them on. The start heat option will immediately start heating the tweezers the moment you apply power, and the turbo sets are just temperature presets. We'll look closer at those in a moment. The next option is LR Select, which allows you to heat just one side of the tweezers, either left or right, or to run them both simultaneously. So technically, you have the option to remove one of these tips and just use it as a regular soldering iron, which is pretty handy. The last option is Restore, which will restore the tweezers back to the factory defaults. So let's take a quick look at the Turbo Sets presets by long pressing button B to select it. If you scroll down to presets and switch it on, the tweezers will go straight to the preset 1 temp when you switch on the heat. Under normal operation, pressing the A or B button will increase or decrease the temperature by the set increment. But when presets is activated, the A button switches between 3 preset temperatures, and the B button goes into turbo mode. The tweezers will only stay in turbo mode for the duration of time set in turbo time, or until you switch it off manually. There is also a shortcut to toggle presets on and off by long pressing A and B buttons simultaneously. So these are some flashy capabilities, but I honestly can't see myself using them. Just raising and lowering the temp with the A and B buttons will be fine for me. And in all honesty, by next week I will probably have forgotten what to press to activate the presets. The next main menu option is Idle. Here there are 4 options. Sleep time is for setting how long the tweezers take to go into sleep mode when left idle. Sleep temp is for setting the temperature the tweezers will drop to during sleep mode. Idle time is for setting how long the tweezers take to completely turn off when left idle. The last option is Screen Open. If this is on, the display will stay on when idle, and if it's off, the screen will go blank. The next main menu option is OLED with 4 options. Brightness for the display brightness, direction for flipping the display 180 degrees for left-handed users, key action for swapping the functionality of the 2 buttons so button A becomes button B and vice versa, and language for selecting the language of the display interface. The next main menu item is Volt with 4 options. Max Volt for selecting the maximum voltage, Max Current for selecting the maximum current, Low Volt for activating low voltage protection, and Comp Volt for setting supply voltage compensation. My apologies, but the information in the manual is pretty vague with these settings, so I can't really add any more detail than that. The second last menu item is Calib for calibrating the tweezers, and the last option is About, which will show you the current firmware version operating on the tweezers. For the first test, I'm going to check how fast the tweezers get to a temperature that will melt leaded solder. It's a pretty unconventional test, but I have performed this with other irons, so I have comparison data. It was lightning fast, melting the solder in less than 5 seconds. Obviously, these tips are pretty small, so I'm sure that helps with the fast heating time. I tested out the tweezers during a live stream where I recapped a vintage Macintosh LC575 logic board. Recapping is the replacement of old, failing, surface mount electrolytic capacitors with new ones. The small tweezer tips struggled a bit with the large capacitor pads, but I was still successful in removing all of the caps using the HT140.
Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of practical testing with this. One thing I can tell you, I've got a PCB here and we have some little resistors here, and they are a 0201 package size. And as you can see, they are a bit too small for these tweezers. So the way they are, you're really looking at anything 0402 or up. So if we take something like this guy, and off he comes, nice and easy there, no problems. And we'll try some here. Yep, piece of cake. So this is an 0805 capacitor, and I'm not having any success getting this off at all. So there are a couple of things working against me here. First of all, this board is actually designed almost like a giant heat sink. So it's sort of sucking away the heat from these tips before it can actually get the component hot enough. And it is lead-free solder, which of course has a higher melting point. But just to show that it can actually be removed, I'm going to hit it with some hot air. And you can see it just came straight off. So the little teeny tips on the tweezers definitely struggled in this instance. Now, I'm not saying these tweezers aren't capable of doing this job. I'm just saying that these tweezers with these incredibly fine tips on them just aren't getting enough heat to the component. Let's give it something a little bit easier. So this board is mainly 1206 and 0805 size components, and this is not having any issue at all. Even with the copper, that large plane of copper under there, that's getting that off. Here's a very blown up diode. Diode. Even a big diode like that, no real issues there. Okay, let's see if we can take off, say, this component here with 3 pins at once. Yep, a little bit of patience, but it definitely came off. Got a great big glob of solder here, and I'm basically just going to get one of the tips here and see how long it takes to melt the whole thing. And contact. Okay. Well, it seemed to do a pretty good job there. It took a little while to get the whole thing melted, but it did do the job. For comparison, I'm now going to do this with my main soldering station. All in all, I was pretty impressed with the HT140 tweezers. They come in a beautiful protective case, they feel good in the hands, they're compact and lightweight, and the supplied stand is sturdy and solid. The HT140 tweezers are currently available for $109 including the power supply and $99 without. The supplied cable is a good quality 1.5 metre silicon USB-C cable. The 65 watt power supply gives enough grunt to heat the tweezers up in lightning fast time, so you can start using them almost as soon as you switch them on. The tweezers definitely struggled with some of the tasks I set it, but I think that comes down to the tips being too small for the job at hand. For most SMT components from 0402 to 1206 in size, the tweezers made very fast work of removing them. I'll definitely be looking at getting some tips that better suit my sort of soldering projects. The Sequre website has these tips with a wider spade or chisel edge, and I think they would be better suited to the sort of repair work I do. There are a few things I don't like, the first being the 2-button navigation, but I've already said my piece about that. And in truth, once I started using the tweezers, the only controls I had to worry about were switching the tweezers off and on and changing the temperature, which is easy. I also find the 4 grub screws a bit fiddly for holding the tip in place. It's definitely the most tedious tip replacement I've ever come across. But on the whole, the HT140 tweezers are pretty good value for money, and I do love the way they can be powered by a standard USB power bank, making them completely portable. And being able to configure the tips to heat only one side to behave like a regular soldering iron is also a nifty feature. A big thanks to Sequre for sending me these tweezers. I did receive them for free, but I haven't been paid for my opinions, which are always open and honest. If you'd like to buy a set of HT140 tweezers, there are links in the description. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel, and thanks for watching.